Hey y'all, Connor here from Kamerastore.com, joined as usual by Nico. Today we have a bit of an intro video to the new Rollei 35AF. We're just going to be talking about it. I haven't really played with the camera, but Nico has. Compare it a little bit, talk about its specifications, its features, compare it with the other new camera from this year, the Pentax 17, as well as the namesake of the camera, the original Rollei 35, and just talk about it.
Yeah, so to start with it, let's say what the Rollei 35AF, which is the new one coming out September 10th, 2024. It's a point and shoot full frame camera dressed as a Rollei 35 Classic with LiDAR focusing and a little bit, it's kind of beefed up, but it is a full frame 35mm camera with LiDAR AF.
Yeah, and you have the LiDAR sensor here, where you would expect to see a normal autofocus sensor. You have the LiDAR here. It is a point-and-shoot camera with autofocus. You do have manual control of your shutter speed and aperture, as well as you can do aperture priority auto exposure. No full program, I'm pretty sure.
No, not that.
Yeah, so just aperture priority and full manual. But both are nice. You have a tiny little OLED screen on the top here that is actually really helpful with your metering and your frame counter and some other features as well. So that's actually really nice to have, and it is an OLED, so it's actually very usable even in bright sunlight. I only had it for 40 minutes when we were out on a photo walk, and it was super readable even in very bright sunlight. So
I mean, if I was going to go with the first impressions, and I can have it a second, the first time you pull it out of the box, it does feel like, like you bought a toy Rollei 35, because this is so much more compact and kind of like solid in many ways, because there's so many mechanisms into it. This feels slightly less solid, but it does end up feeling pretty good in the hand. It's not awkward to hold.
No.
It's the on-off is very easy. It has off, no flash, and ISO settings. The OLED, like you mentioned, is it really helps you and assists you through the operation. One thing I noticed is the manual basically lacks any information on almost anything it can do. And if you are a new user, I would hope that cameras that are shipping, this is a pre-production kind of unit, will have more information of how to set the ISO and how to change. It doesn't even tell you what battery the camera uses.
Yeah.
The battery goes on the back, but feel is fine. It's actually better than I expected after using it. There are some quirks to the first impressions, like the advanced lever does feel quite ratchety and delicate. And
Hold it to your mic and do it.
Yeah, and the rewinding is extremely non-easy. Like I'd say it's meant to be almost like a Leica M6 kind of rewinding, and that one is also quite easy. This felt like I was about to rip film at some point. So first impressions in that realm is not great. Loading the film and opening the back door is not great, and I'll show it on video. There's a couple of videos, but you have to unlock the bottom and then pull, and you can see that I'm pulling it. And as a new user, you would think you're breaking the camera, but this is how it's supposed to be. And now it comes off and you can load the film.
And that is exactly how the older OLED did it, so that's probably why they made that decision. But you can argue that in the modern world, this is not the best way to unload a camera. Most cameras that came out after this didn't have a system like this. So,
but yeah, I'd say first impressions is it's okay. They remade a camera to look like a classic, but they did pick the things that the classic was not great at and kept them, which makes sense because you're going for the classic looks. But it kind of would be nice that it didn't have some of them. Like the advance, give me motor advance. Like it would have been fine. This feels it's already almost feeling kind of a little loose. So just give me, and this also, if you move it around, it also has a little wiggle. So it replicated the same fault.
yeah.
It's like they didn't correct the faults there. So first impressions are okay. And that's just touching it, loading it, taking it out. But then we have shot it. We've shot a roll for now. I'm not very good at shooting rolls under pressure. So we did a little photo walk and got some results. We can talk about that a little bit later. I would say we've compared it a lot to the legacy version. I'd
Yeah.
say we could compare it a little bit to the Pentax, which is the other one that we
Yeah,
released.
and I think that it's an interesting discussion. You talked about manual, like how this sort of doesn't feel so great, the manual advance and the rewind as well. And it's interesting to see these companies come back with film cameras and like to see what parts of the film camera they think are necessary. Clearly, both Pentax and MiNT thought that a manual advance lever would be important to their customers, whether that's just for the feel of it or whether that's for any other reason. I mean, I assume it would be cheaper for them to put a motor.
It has to be cheaper to put a motor, at least for the advance. I understand the rewinding means another motor, and maybe it's a space constraint too. But I mean, in this camera, the advancing feels scary.
Yeah, that was the first thing I noticed when you gave it to me was, well, it was the second thing I noticed after it being very light compared to the actual Rollei 35. And it really does, like, especially with film in it. Here, I'll fire it and then wind it near my mic. And you can hear it ratcheting a little bit. There's no film inside this, so it's much easier. With film inside, it really, like, if you're experienced with cameras, it kind of feels like you're gonna break the film.
It feels like that, exactly that feeling of you finish the roll, the camera will let you continue winding, and it will rip the sprockets.
Yeah.
And that's literally after 3 to 4 shots, I was like, am I ripping the sprockets? And knowing film enough, I was like, well, you can only rip them so many times. So if I'm ripping it after 4 shots, it shouldn't feel like I'm ripping it.
Yeah.
But it does feel a little bit like that. But yeah, I think the choice of doing the levers and the buttons and all these is a kind of a homage to what people, the brands thought people want from film cameras. I'll say the Pentax one is way more refined. When you advance it, it does, even though it's really small, it does give a nice satisfaction. You know, it feels nice.
Yeah.
It's really well done, and I think you can see, obviously, the budgets between the manufacturing of Pentax and MiNT, or the Rollei 35. This is, by the way, manufactured by MiNT in, I think it's Hong Kong. So it's a smaller company. It's not the original Rollei that made it. They partnered. That's an important feature for distribution and name rights and things like that. But Pentax, you can tell they had a lot more budget to create the camera and to experience with pinions and gears, and because it does feel
Yeah. Well, that was one of my
good.
that was one of my biggest takeaways with that was that even though it was quite plasticky with first impressions, the stuff that you're actually touching while you use it all feels great. And I think my experience, my immediate experience with this was almost the opposite, where that the build of it's all pretty solid, but then the stuff that you're interacting with, the film advance lever, the shutter, don't feel so great. And maybe I should mention the shutter thing now. It's a really weird thing where you half press the shutter, it focuses. That's fine. It's a little bit loud, but that's fine. Then when you fire it, the shutter button stays down. It doesn't pop back up, which I don't know if that's an homage to this or why they did that. It only pops back up when you wind the film. And it just feels so bad. It feels like it's broken. I mean, it feels like it's not working properly. And maybe it's not, but this is a pre-production unit, so anything we're saying could possibly be fixed by the time you get it.
They did mention something about the idea that you can't double press the shutter. That will do some sort of damage. And I actually think it says it after use. No, that's a different one. There's one in the manual that says something of like, be very careful that you don't shoot, and instead of advancing, try to shoot more times, because I guess that might trigger something internally. Yeah, that one doesn't pop back up.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does?
Yeah.
It does a little noise.
I think this one is like stuck in bulb mode, but
It could be.
yeah.
Either way, the differences between them are quite obvious. And we will, I guess the best way is we can compare some of the features.
Yeah.
And we have a little list, so excuse that we read a little the list. So first one would be format. The Pentax 17, as the name indicates, shoots half frame. It's 17 by 35, I think, or 30 something.
24 by 17.
24 by 17, yeah, sorry for that. So it's half frame. So you get double the amount of exposures that you would get on a normal roll of film on a classic camera like a Nikon F, something like that. The Rollei
is full frame. So you get that full, it's 24 by 36 millimeters. So theoretically, twice as much imaging surface, which can give you more detail, especially in shadows.
Separation.
Yeah, more separation from your subject. Less photos, which, you know, for some people is an advantage and some people is a disadvantage. I know sometimes 72 can be really overwhelming in terms of getting it processed in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, and you can do, well, they used to sell at least 24 exposure rolls. I don't know if everything is available in 24 anymore, but you could do that and it would be 48 versus 36, so it's a little closer. But yeah, the film format, some people find it very important, think that why did Pentax come out with a half frame? It's a good question. Rollei made the 35 full frame, so you got an option now.
More traditional choice, for sure.
Yeah. Then we move into lens. The Pentax 17 comes with a 25mm, which, because it is half a frame, it converts to more than that. And it's a 3.5 aperture, so not super wide open. Yeah. And that creates a little bit more focus. And that makes sense with the choice because without going too far into the list, the focus system here is zone focus. So having less film size plus a wider lens plus an f5 3.5 will make sure that you almost always get pictures in focus.
Yeah, well, and with something like both of these cameras, really, a wider aperture isn't necessarily even that much of an advantage. Like, especially with an automatic exposure system like in this, it's really rarely even going to use f2.8 unless you force it to. A lot of, like, the Olympus Mewtwo, and there's a lot of cameras that have the f2.8, and then they get very hyped because of it, but they don't really ever use it. Like the cameras would more willingly switch to the flash than use f2.8.
Yeah, and that's usually due to the max shutter speed.
Yep.
So we're talking the lens in this case, but max shutter speed on this one's 1/500th of a second, and on this one 1/350th of a second. So if there's a lot of sun, you can't shoot 2.8 1/350th of a second unless you're using a very low ISO. With this one, you can go a little bit more. But what lens is on the Rollei?
So we have a pretty normal 35 f2.8. It's, I think, similar to...
40?
They had a 40 on the old one. So a 42.8. This is a little bit wider, but it's very normal for a point-and-shoot autofocus camera like this. That's like the lens that people want. The same as the, like I said, the Olympus Mewtwo.
Close enough to the Contax
it's
T2.
Close enough to the 38
yeah.
on the T2.
Yep.
Some of the Yashica Ts are 35 2.8. So.
And one thing to note that we're talking to the lens is this Pentax has a filter thread. So this filter thread lets you use yellow filters, blue filters, red filters, ND filters, Pro Mist, whatever you want. And that's pretty useful. And even like screw in a hood if you actually wanted to. The Rollei, on the other hand, does not.
No, it doesn't have any threads here or any mechanism that we can see of mounting accessories at all. There is this sort of knurled section on the side, but that could easily just be an homage to the old one and not actually be a functional piece. It would be great if there was some sort of accessory mount that you could put on here and then screw in traditional filters, because that would greatly expand the capabilities of the camera. I mean, if you could have creative filters or colored filters or NDs.
And traditionally, MiNT, the manufacturer of this camera, has made like clip-on filter systems. Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised that they might make some ND system, mostly for what I said, the max shutter speed and trying to get like that 2.8 look on your pictures. But it won't be a you choose your filter. It'll be their system if it does happen. I'm pretty sure this is a perfect opportunity for 3D printing products to come out. And I'm sure someone's going to grab the bayonet looking thing and make some, adjustable, and you can screw on like a 43 or 39 mil filters and you can use those. But it is a thing to keep in mind. And one thing also surrounding the lens is the Pentax 17 has the light meter built into kind of the frame of the lens inside, and the Rollei does not, meaning this will correct when you use a filter.
That's the meter sensor,
right? It's on the outside. So if you had a filter on, you would have to compensate by changing the ISO in the manual setting.
Yeah, and that's a little bit of a shame, but I guess if they weren't planning on having filters for it in the first place, then it doesn't matter. But yeah, a good thought, I think, on the Pentax 17, that you can expand your photography in that way with the filters.
To finish it off with the lens, we could go for the focus system.
Yeah.
The Pentax uses a zone focus system, but a motor focus approach, which sounds weird.
It is weird.
It sounds like it's doing AF, but it's not. So what it does is you set your focus to whatever little icon you like, and there's the number of guides on the bottom for the people that are a bit more, into that. I'm one number guide. I'm not really good with the people group icon.
The pictograms.
Yes, and what it does is when you half press it, it kind of like goes exactly to that position with a motor. So they use the motor for the lens to achieve the zone focus you have predetermined, and then you can take a picture. As in the Rollei uses a different mechanism.
Yeah, the Rollei has a LiDAR system. I don't know what LiDAR stands for. We can put it on the screen. It stands for something.
It's lasers that are basically
lasers. But yeah, this is in practice, a much more traditional point and shoot system where you half press the shutter, it focuses, and then you take a picture. With the Pentax, yeah, it does have the motor, but the motor is so quiet that you kind of don't even notice that it's doing it.
it's
Like hold it up to your microphone and you probably still can't
It's
even
like
hear
ultrasonic.
Yeah.
It's like sounds,
it. Yeah.
and you can hear Connor's.
I'm sorry, yeah, I'm blowing out our camera guys like headphones.
I mean, it sounds like my knees in the morning.
It's very
This
loud.
doesn't sound like
yeah.
that.
That was one of my first impressions too, is that the autofocus is just really loud. It sounds like those early Minolta autofocus SLRs with the screw mount lenses, or even the ones where the motor is in the lens.
I mean, it's probably just a piece of plastic pinion going forward and backward.
Yeah,
And the focus, one thing that this camera does have due to the AF is it has a little indicator in the viewfinder.
Yeah.
And that little indicator kind of blinks for like half a second until it achieves focus to confirm that. And if you're closer than it can, it will blink in a way like you can't take this image.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good that it can do that, honestly.
In my experience, and again, I didn't have it for very long, it was pretty confident. The LiDAR maybe isn't instantaneous, but it thinks for a second and then it's good. And we didn't have, I think we looked through the one roll that we shot and there was maybe one picture that was out of focus. So a pretty good hit rate, I would say.
And it doesn't tell you in the manual where it's focusing. Is it the center point? Is it center weighted? Is it the whole frame? But it does have a viewfinder, which we can talk about the viewfinder, which is quite blurry most times, unless some direct, like right now in the studio setting, we're pointing to a huge softbox, and then suddenly the whole frame lines come very good.
The frame lines are very dim in normal situations.
Yeah.
And I can say in general, the viewfinder is quite distorted.
When I put it to my eye the first time, now I'm wearing glasses, so I took my glasses off and put it closer to my eye. Without that light that will help with the frame lines, it looks like when you put on drops in your eyes and you go to the eye doctor to like dilate your pupil, it kind of looked a little bit like that. Like they're not really sharp, they're not very obvious, meaning, and this I say towards, if you're focusing because you're using the AF system, you have to kind of like aim for a cross line up the center.
Yeah, and I think that
you can
like most of the
press and
time I can
recompose.
see that, like the circle in the center, which is very traditional point and shoot as well.
Yeah.
But even if you can't see it super well, once you know that that's where it's focusing, that dot in the
You
center,
get used to it. And the Pentax, in contrast, is just because you don't need to see focus. You're focusing with a scale focus. It's a much easier viewfinder.
Oh, it's so much better.
It is so much better.
The Pentax's doesn't get flared very much. It doesn't distort very much. The frame lines are still a little bit dim. But I've used it outside and I could see them still, and whereas I couldn't see them very well here.
It's a very similar reflective, like it basically soaks the light that's coming in, and if I point at the softbox, I see the frame lines so well, and the moment I go away, they just kind of disappear. They are sharper, that's for sure. Whatever system they're doing, maybe some chemical etching is good. But that's the viewfinder. Then there's the film loading, which you've kind of mentioned a little bit on this one, but we can do
Yeah,
a
we
little
talked
bit
about
more.
it a little bit with the Rollei. It is I mean, I've gone on record many times as saying that I don't like the original Rollei because of how fiddly it is to load. And just based on that, I hadn't taken the back off this before. That was way more fiddly.
The Pentax, in the other hand, in my opinion, went with a way more boring but functional way, which is you pull this open, spring-loaded mechanism, and beautiful. It's just the point and shoot from the end of the point and shoot era mechanism. It has everything you want. It doesn't have one thing you might want, which is DX code reading, which this one actually does have.
It does have, but it doesn't have.
It does.
Does it have DX code?
Yeah,
you
it
can
does.
set
It grabs it from the roll, then you can overrule it. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
That makes it impossible to open, but then gives you the feature for DX code reading. But yeah, this Pentax one is way more classic. It has no problem with light seals because it has this like light piping situation where it won't travel. It knows the door is open, which is also cool because it resets the shutter count. This one's probably has a similar thing that it does it through a little Arduino or whatever it has in there. But you can go through the ISO. And this one, when you go to the ISO, it's a mechanical wheel. That one, you have to press the self-timer, and it kind of cycles around.
Yeah, the ISO is set on the OLED here. I was looking for how to make it just DX code, but I couldn't find it.
Well, when you
It's
put
probably
a
in
roll,
the manual.
it jumps in.
Okay.
When it feels it. But yeah, the film loading is okay on both once you get used to it, but this one's, the Pentax is way more like what you expect if you've shot film cameras before, and this is the one you expect if you've shot the Rollei before.
Yeah, and it begs that question again of like what they chose to keep from the film camera era, and especially with this from the original Rollei. And it seems like if I were to make a new Rollei 35, I would get rid of that film loading because that's the part of it that I dislike the most.
I would have, I mean, and we can end it up with a conclusion, but my initial conclusion for this is if this would have been done without the homage to the Rollei, it could have been a much nicer feeling camera. It would have been maybe design choices and, you know, do we like it, do we not? Like the Mute 2 is a camera that you can like or not, but it does look like a clamshell, like kind of aesthetically. It looks like a Tesla of a point and shoot. This is like a brick of a point and shoot.
Yeah.
And I do like the looks of the Rollei 35 Classic, but I would have loved to see this on a more original design on their own part, because I think it would have been fine.
Yeah, I do wonder what they would have come up with if they didn't sort of have to stick to this design language.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of things that they borrowed from this that I don't know if I would have done that at the very least.
Yeah. And then, I mean, there's a lot of things to talk about, the modes and things. The Rollei, Pentax has a lot of physical modes, the P mode, it has the night mode, the bokeh, which is aperture priority, kind of trying to go as low as possible, bulb mode, and so on. This camera doesn't have so many modes.
No, it's like I said earlier, aperture priority or fully manual. That's
an aperture priority with plus minus overexposure. So
Yeah,
it
you
does
do
have
get it.
exposure compensation on aperture priority.
Yeah, you get
which is very mint-ish.
plus or minus 2 stops in your aperture priority mode. You also get these dials on the front, again reminiscent of the original Rollei. These don't do anything as far as
As far as we know.
They're just to remind you what how many shots you have in your roll and what type of film you have in there. Which who has 12 exposure film these days, really?
No, you make your own roll. The last kind of thing is the flash, which honestly, flash is supposed to be mostly to get the picture right in the low light conditions or a party. This has a bit of a chunkier flash that has a very slim
Yeah, the flash is really small on this guy. We didn't use it very much. I used it on the Pentax 17 and it worked pretty well, I would say.
Yes, it does. But I mean, flash photography, you're never going to expect the quality of like a pro flash setup. You're just kind of like, I need the picture, that's it. So they both kind of do their job. I'll say that. And then I guess we could go frame counter on this one is mechanical, and that one has the OLED. Yeah. This is all OLED driven. There's a few things it doesn't have that I wish they had put in. For example, if you're going to shoot and it's underexposing or overexposing, there's no indicator on the viewfinder. It'll only tell you through the OLED.
Yeah.
as this one will have some blinking lights menus that you have to kind of memorize. I don't remember them.
Yeah, it's funny because that was one of the things that we maybe didn't like about the Pentax is that there was a whole bunch of different combinations of the blinking LEDs that we had to like learn.
And now we missed them on this.
And now we missed them on this because this doesn't give you any indication.
Except for focus.
Yeah, except for the focus
And
the flash readiness. But yeah, it is something that on the Pentax, because it's the same two LEDs with the flash and with the focus or exposure, but then they blink in different combinations to tell you a bunch of different things.
And I think the last biggest difference that we can talk about is pricing, which is one that everybody wants to know. The prices have been available for a while on both models, but let's say US pricing because Europe has different taxes depending on the country, but the Pentax has been launched at around 500 USD. And the Rollei is being launched around 800 USD. It's $300 more for everything we've just mentioned. This one is from a pretty big company, Pentax Ricoh. That one's from MiNT, which is kind of still a bit of an unknown player in many ways. They do a lot of instant stuff, but they have never really made a roll film camera.
Yeah.
And then in Europe, you add taxes. The Pentax, depending on the country, 550, and this is going to go around 850, even 900 if the taxes are higher. But yeah, price-wise, if I had to choose one of these two and I wasn't shooting film at all, I think it's a tough fight because the full frame is important for a lot of people. I do like the idea of the aperture priority, like on this camera. I do like that it's 500th of a second, which gives me a little bit more possibilities in the sunlight. I like quite a lot of it. But then again, the build feeling of the Pentax is great. And the only thing I would say is if you're annoyed by zone focusing, then this is a must. But it won't focus fast. It's not a Sony focusing
super
system.
fast. It does, like I said, it thinks.
It's film era focus. That's too close.
That's too close. It's screaming at me. I think that they're going after different markets. Like I think that the people who are interested in this want manual controls, and we're probably let down by this not having them. Whereas somebody that wants that is basically full program only, and even that sort of fixed focus kind of thing, the cameras sort of just maybe aren't appealing to the other cameras' customers.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing, I guess.
I could say, I think Pentax tried to go for a new market.
Yeah.
Like the 500 euro mark, with all the features it does have, is for a new user, new market.
Yeah.
As this could be potentially going after the higher quality point and shoot camera.
Yeah.
Like the Contax T2s, T3s, the Tiaras, the Rollei, the AF version of the Rollei, not this Rollei, and the Yashica T4, T5s, which are becoming quite unreliable. But this is in that price range of like a Contax T2 nowadays is around 1,000, give or take. This one is there.
Yeah, it sort of slots in like even with like a Mini Lux, just above the T4, T5 Yashicas.
I would buy this before a T2 at this time and age.
A Contax T2, yeah, just for reliability and
the focus
hopefully
is cool.
some repairability or warranty.
Yep.
Obviously that they will have a warranty, at least in Europe.
Yeah. And then I think one last thing that is maybe a bit more niche and not so interesting for most people is the way Rollei and MiNT have collaborated and the distribution and all of this, which I literally have here Nico rant, because like I come from more of the industry thoughts on the cameras. I've criticized their partnership because I thought Rollei...
Wait, should you put the jacket on for Nico's photo news?
No, I can't. But Rollei has really not been in the camera industry, like the hardware, like a physical camera industry for many, many, many years.
No.
The brand has deviated towards photo accessories, and you could go analyze them, that they're rebadged products from other countries or whatever. I'm not going to get into that. But I feel like MiNT could have done an amazing thing with creating it. But maybe there's some legal reasons why Rollei had to be put into board, because it does, it's a Rollei camera looking.
Yeah.
And maybe they have some patents where they can still retain the looks and things like that. But I feel MiNT will take care of sales throughout everywhere but Europe, and Rollei will take care of sales and distribution through Europe. So if you're out of Europe, you can buy it from MiNT directly, and I guess partners. If you're in Europe, you have to buy it from Rollei, or stores and partners. We are based in Europe, so we will depend on that situation. And then again, it goes into their marketing is maybe not used to a camera release. We got this unit. I personally got this unit from them to test it out beforehand.
But you got this from MiNT.
Yes, they reached out and I've been testing it. And I've been super critical about this on my YouTube channel. I think the camera came out to look way better and feel way better than I maybe expected. And the results are very good. But I still don't love the partnership. I would have liked to see MiNT shine a bit more and get more credit. It does say made by MiNT on the inside in a very, very, very small font next to where the battery kind is.
Yeah.
So,
And I'm gonna
yeah.
struggle getting this off again. Yeah, it does say MiNT. Where?
I think it's on
Oh,
the
here it is.
bottom.
Yeah, designed by MiNT.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says it here.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah, I agree with you that it's a little bit of a shame because they do make some cool stuff. And it would be nice to see them get a little bit more
Oh, yeah, there you go.
recognition for it on this, which is their first major 35mm camera.
First only.
And as we've said, it would be really interesting to see what they could do without having to stick to this Rollei brand language and design. Yeah, we'll see, and I get why they did it because this obviously Rollei 35 and Rollei in general brings a lot more exposure to their name, whereas people might not know who they are if they only shoot 35mm because they really do a lot of instant stuff.
But if they're going for that demographic that knows Rollei, it's the old farts like me. And that's where you will grab the camera and instantly be thrown off because it doesn't feel like the OG and it doesn't shoot like the OG.
It's true.
So in a way, I find it a little bit here and there, and maybe it was a investment and they funded this. I don't know all the details on the back end, but yeah, that's a little bit of the feeling. I am excited for the camera. I hope it does well. I think even though we've criticized it quite a bit here, overall it's been a decent experience to shoot it. And we do have as the last thing the photos, which we can go over.
we have some photos, so let's take a look at those.
So in the photo department, like Connor mentioned, focus has been very consistent. It is kind of like a half press, focus, and shoot. So I want to say it's a sports or activity camera.
No, it thinks a little bit.
Yeah.
But it felt confident, which is something that some point and shoots and even some SLRs and mirrorless, like they hunt a lot. This didn't feel like it. It feels like it's like, oh, focus.
Yes, and because of the LiDAR system, it doesn't have to have light because it's using lasers, so it can focus with the same accuracy in the dark.
That's cool.
So that's pretty cool. But I took my camera out with my family. I have a few pictures of my daughter. I shot even with a flash. I think for flash photography, like I said previously, it kind of does what it needs to do, which is get the subject exposed properly with flash, and then the background kind of falls where it falls. I try to go for the minimum focus, meaning 0.7 centimeters, which helps blur a little bit of the background. I even took one going down on the mechanical stairs. But outdoors, I have a picture here of my family. You kind of can see what I would say the full frame effect a little bit. Like there is depth to it, even though it is quite sharp overall.
Yeah, and even with the focus not at minimum distance, you still like get a slightly blurry background.
Yeah. So distortion on the edges and stuff like that, I'll leave for people that love to talk about distortion and quality, but I think the lens renders what I would expect from a point and shoot.
Yeah.
If you're going for distortion and aberrations and chromatic this and that, you might as well just shoot SLR or medium format. Point and shoot is a little bit less of a thing that concerns me. I'm trying to capture a moment more than get perfection, but it does render quite nicely. I have a picture here of a sign with a tree in the background, just because I like the restaurant. I have some buildings that are a bit more like an infinity focus, trying to see if that LiDAR can detect, a building that's like 100 meters away from me. And honestly, it does the job.
Looks
it
fine.
Shoots as expected.
Looks pretty sharp even in the corners.
Yeah, and one funny thing that I think we haven't mentioned is supposedly the whole lens design of the Rollei is done by Pentax engineers. And they did that before even knowing Pentax was designing a camera themselves.
Really?
They were like very apologetic, like, hey, we really didn't know Pentax was coming with something, so we did like knock on the door of some old engineers to get the optical design for the lens.
Oh, so okay, so it's not by Pentax, the company. It's by people that used to work at Pentax.
Yes.
That's hilarious.
That's pretty cool.
So
But the
Pentax
lens
is really dominating the new film camera lens market.
Yes, the lens renders really nice. There's pictures here, buildings, grass. The light meter is sensitive, and probably I should have used more of the over and under exposure in aperture priority.
Well, but that picture you showed where it struggled a bit is like dark windows and very bright sky. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's a point and shoot will
And
struggle with that.
this film was Portra 400, and I DX coded, I overrid it to 200, so Portra had a little bit more light, which it usually likes. But this is a closer up. We have a Rollei telly here, and it looks good. I have to say, it honestly looks good. I don't dislike the pictures. They're focused fine. This could be my Mew. Yeah, here's Connor. This could be my Mew 2 shooting. Like, it literally could be my Mew 2 shooting.
I mean, if you showed me that and said it was any point and shoot, I'd be like, all right.
Yeah, which is, in this case, it's a praise to the quality of the camera.
That's what they're going for.
In the days of the point and shoots, they had hundreds of millions of euros, dollars, whatever currency they were using back then to develop these cameras. And this is MiNT making cameras designing cameras in Hong Kong and manufacturing in small scales.
And this is probably going to be the biggest scale thing that they've ever done.
Probably is. And that's another thing, is like we have to take that into account, that Pentax is making bigger series, even though Pentax is a small player in the camera market. But MiNT is like,
it's all relative.
It's really small if you compare it to Pentax. But yeah, I took some pictures that were more like, my holiday photos of Brighton's beach, which is Tampere, obviously. And it does what it needs to do. Picture of Connor with a funky old rangefinder.
Looks good, though.
The only photo that's out of focus.
Yeah, that's the only one.
I feel like I misstepped more than anything.
Yeah, you might have slipped, because it looks like I'm kind of like
there's like a
shaken rather than blurry.
There's like a half of something. I don't know.
Yeah.
There was weird steps, and I'm wearing glasses, which I'm not used to, so I do fall every now and then. This one's one you can see the light meter is triggered by the light on the background, and Tony's underexposed.
Yeah, it sort of looks like it was metering the whole frame rather than the middle. Because it grabbed those super bright highlights from that like top left and then gave you really dark shadows in the center.
Exposed the background perfectly, and the front being backlit is bad.
Yeah.
Another photo of a little tower. This again looks very much point and shoot-ish. This is a detail photo of some roots on the floor. I thought it was cool. You can dig more into the details of it. I mean, I was trying to see how details render on this. And being Portra 400, which is not the smallest grain, and whatever you want to say about Portra 400, it looks like what I expect. This is me. I guess Connor or Tony were shooting some other shots, so this is me.
It was me, because the horizon is so bad.
You did another one that has good horizon. But you can see that I'm a little underexposed, and in the scan, it's kind of try to pull off some details. And you can see grain, which
it's the same.
400, same
the horizon. I have the same thing when I take pictures of products on the website that like they're just not straight. It's a me thing.
You make the rules, but you don't follow them. Then point and shoot pictures, they all look good, if I have to say. They just like, this is a perfectly exposed photo. The light meter does its job. I have to say, we did put this on the testing equipment, like our Kyoritsu time, perfect, like, all of that. And it was, I think, the maximum was 0.3 over exposing.
And that's well within tolerances.
0.3 is fine for a factory camera. And Pentax also did fine, so that's a good thing. The cameras are within the tolerances. That's me. We have another picture with a crooked horizon. But yeah, the pictures look good. Like, I could see myself shooting black and white and printing this in the darkroom.
See, that one I did such
a
good job
with
the horizon.
You really did a good job with this one.
Yeah.
You even froze the water for a second.
I know, I used the right shutter speed.
But yeah, all the pictures look good. The camera didn't really miss focus. I feel like the only one that looks a little blurred is more like me moving myself by accident. Or maybe I shot flash. And
maybe.
I think I might have said, like, let's see if the flash can reach. I don't know. For one roll that we've shot, you've shot a few, I've shot most of it. It looks way better than I expected from a camera manufacturer that had never made a roll film camera and a AF camera.
I think my takeaway is kind of largely the same with the Pentax 17, that it's a good first effort, There's pros and there's cons to it. There's things that are weird, there's things that are good. I think I'm most excited for what they do next. Like we talked about what MiNT could do maybe without this Rollei branding. I'd love to see them try that, to try to make a camera all on their own. I think that once they get used to the distribution, especially, that's the biggest change for them. They can maybe get enough hype around their name because people will know that they made this, even if it doesn't say it so much. And Pentax too. I mean, they have, plans for a line of cameras, which...
Yeah, I think the conclusion is they're not perfect. They're quirky in some ways.
Yep.
But if you're new to film and you grab a camera like this, you can buy it brand new. It has a warranty and it's kind of fun to use. Mm-hmm. And results are good on both cameras. You do, obviously, with film, always need to know a little bit of what you're doing, but it does quite well for not knowing what you're doing. I think some of the pictures in there have been even taken by my daughters. So, and they're 10 and 12, so they can shoot this camera and they can shoot probably the Pentax with just a quick explanation of the zone focusing. But the Rollei is pretty easy. Just half press with something in the middle and then press all the way and you're good to go. Like I said, if it is without the limitations of the shutter speed and aperture, it will stay on the OLED screen, which doesn't say it on the viewfinder. But if you're shooting color negative and you're overexposing, it's going to be fine. If you're underexposing, then it is what it is. But yeah, I think that's our whole overview of the Rollei 35AF and a little bit of comparison to the Pentax 17 with some pictures in it.
Yeah, thank you guys for watching. When I get a chance to play with this a little bit more, we'll have a more formal review of it with a written portion and photos you can look at and all that kind of stuff. But this is just sort of a introduction to this camera. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I've been Connor from Kamerastore.com with Nico. See you in the next one.
Thank you.